John Winston Howard is the former Prime Minister of Australia. He has been working all over the country to save the country from the mad left. We had a chance to talk a bit earlier today, and I began by asking him about the basic incompetence of a bloke who can't even get it right about whether or not Australia's borders are open.
Well, that's a bad start for the second last day of the campaign. I thought there'd been a bit of publicity given to the opening of the border, but that aside, to have an unemployment rate with a 3 in front of it is a cause of great celebration, because in the end, if you can't get a job, you can forget about a wage increase, because you won't have a wage to increase. And as Tony Blair once famously said, and he was a Labor leader who could win elections, he said, fairness in the workplace starts with the chance of a job. And that is so true. And I'm very happy that we live in a country that now has an unemployment rate lower than it's been for the last 50 years. That's terrific. I mean, we just have to remind ourselves that the predictions only a short time ago were a lot more dire than we even care to remember. And not only did they not eventuate, but they didn't eventuate because of the way in which the government intervened, spent money in a good cause, created a bigger deficit than we normally want, but had to do it. Because if you send the country into recession, you've got an obligation to pull it out. And we've done that. The country is roaring back, and I just hope the Australian people on Saturday vote to keep the people who've presided over this remarkable recovery.
I agree with you completely. I mean, obviously, you hire governments to keep you safe. That's what they've done. Stand up for your values. That's what you've done. And get out of the way to make sure that people can prosper, which is exactly what they've done. But we see today, Labor puts out its costings. They already publicly admit that the deficits will be higher, the debt will be deeper, and they've got this dirty little trick of having tens of billions of dollars, quote unquote, off budget, which means we have to pay that bill as well.
Well, you can be absolutely certain of one thing, that any announced Labor deficit will in reality turn out to be worse, because that's what happened when they were last in power. They are not good at managing money, and I hope the Australian people will recall that and will vote for a group of men and women who do put much greater emphasis on balancing the books. I don't like the fact that we're in deficit, so heavily in deficit, but the alternative to that was to leave the economy a smoking ruin, because unlike other recessions, the government created this recession. It created it in the name of saving lives because of the threat to life and health of people through the pandemic. But having created the recession, we had to spend money to pull it out, and that's what's happened.
Now, you have been working harder than the current leaders of political parties. You've been all over the country, shaking hands, high-fiving here and there. Give me an idea about the mood. What's looking good for the government, and what's a bit of a worry?
Well, there's no doubt that after you've been in power for almost a decade, some people get a bit tetchy. Some people think it could be done better, it could be done this, that and the other. And that's there, I understand that. And I think to his enormous credit, the Prime Minister understands that. But what I find encouraging is that nobody is coming up to me and says, Albo's the answer. Nobody. I mean, I remember 2007 when I lost to Kevin Rudd. I didn't like it. I couldn't understand how he was able to sell himself to the Australian public, because I thought he was a touch artificial. But you could sense the mood. They weren't nasty to me, but they were like coming to the end of a long book. They'd enjoyed the read, but it was time to get to the last page and close the book and get on to another. And that's what happened. And they embraced Mr. Rudd. They thought he was okay. Then after a while, that all started to fall apart. I don't get that mood with Anthony Albanese. I get the mood of the public that they really think maybe he's not up to the job. He keeps getting fairly simple things wrong, like the unemployment rate. And he said it was, 5.1, in reality it was 4. when he didn't know that key interest rate, when he started today saying the borders were still closed and then said, I know I was really talking in the past tense. Well, I think his education was better than that, and he knows the difference between current and past tense in English language. So I think people are saying to themselves, oh, I may not agree with this or that Morrison's done, but is this fellow really up to the job? Will he be better? And I think the more people who focus on that will come to the conclusion that they should hang on to the stability, the reliability and the resilience that they have at the present time.
Now, I know that this is a bit of a Rorschach test and it's in the eye of the beholder, but I think that there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, and I think that they've tipped into the arrogance with the week-long victory lap, with the declarations about who gets sworn in first, with a promise to fly off overseas as early as next week, leaving us with a Deputy Prime Minister, Richard Marles, who may well have to keep handing his speeches to the Chinese. But fair dinkum, they really do feel like they are up and over the line, and I think instinctively Australians don't like that.
Well, they don't. The old don't get ahead of yourself. I think this election is going to be very close. And I think anybody who is talking as if it's going to be a clear-cut change of government on Saturday night is really displaying hubris and really behaving arrogantly. If the Australian people vote to change the government, well, it will be a huge honour for Mr Albanese, and like everybody else, I will wish him well. But they haven't made their decision yet. The votes are still being cast, and there's a lot more to be cast between now and 6 p.m. on Saturday night. And for Mr Albanese to be talking about his international travel plans, I mean, heavens above, he's got to put a government together. And can I tell him that's quite complicated? Involves a bit of time, a bit of effort, and you've got to get the numbers right. Now, I know he's not strong on numbers, but you've got to get those numbers right. I just think it's bizarre that this man should be talking about going to Tokyo. I mean, that all happens after you're sworn in and everything. Dear oh me, he just doesn't have a grip on reality.
It's been fun to talk to him all the way through the campaign. I look forward to doing so for many, many years to come.